All right, and we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Friday Night Fire. My name is Mike, and on my left, your right, is Mr. Matt Koenig. And we're here for another episode of Friday Night Fire where we have conversation, inspiration, motivation, stuff that ends in shun. And,
the show
we talk
begins.
about motivation, inspiration, faith-based conversation, and foundation is what we actually do. But I just thought I'd change it up tonight.
I like
also, for those of you that
with
maybe
gumption,
that's right. If you can add shun to it.
What's up, Ron? What's up, Will McCormick in the house? Thank you guys so much for jumping on the Clubhouse.
So we are live. For anybody who's watching right now, we're live on both of our YouTube channels. My YouTube channel is, where is my YouTube channel? YouTube.com/with Mike. That's where I share the scripture and devotional and my mornings with Mike, which I do on Monday mornings. If you are interested in joining me there, Matt's channel here is youtube.com/JesusWay.
Jesus Way.
And where he shares some awesome inspirational messages and sometimes exchanges 56 comments with people that disagree with his message.
Are you referring to the narcissist injury giver comments? Yeah, there were.
I am.
Was it 56? I saw it was a lot.
It was like 56. So
it was a long 3 days.
One last message is that if you have a message to get out, because we do stream this to multiple places, we want to engage with you. We want to make an impact. And if you're interested, if you have a message that you want to get out, for those of you that are watching, you can certainly go to join-streamyard.com and get a free 14-day trial of StreamYard. They do sponsor our stream here, which is awesome of them because that allows us to get our message out to all of you. And with that, tonight we're getting into Friday Night Fire. Matt, you have a little mood music going there in the background?
I actually do. Hold on. Alexa, stop. Now I don't. But so we don't violate any copyrights, we can't play this, so I'll just sing it. Money, 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 money. Some people got to have... We're going to talk about tithing today. We're talking about tithes and offerings and giving.
So that is the jam tonight. So tithes and offerings.
Hi, right? Mike. Talk to me. What do you think about tithing? How do you feel about tithing? You know, for those that aren't watching, I'm making weird faces in the camera.
First off, what is tithing?
Oh, that's a good question.
Let's kind of define that, because I know we get a bunch of different people that come into the show from time to time. What is tithing? What is it defined as, for one?
Good question.
Okay, so do you want me to answer my own question, or do you want to answer question?
I love that you said that. You put a lot of good questions in the description of this. So for those on Clubhouse, you didn't see them, but there were a lot of things like, what is tithing? Is it even biblical? Is it something churches put out there just so they can raise a little money, build a new playground? Or what you didn't say was, what I love, is tithing so that Joel Osteen can buy a new sweet car. Some people think that tithing is you're giving money to the church staff building so they can go blow it on fun toys that they want. So I think that the best way to answer the question you asked, though, really is to look at what the scripture shows us. Because this is where we get the initial picture of tithing, is Genesis 4, right?
Right.
Cain and Abel. Did you want to answer your question, or were you asking me?
Well, No, I mean, I think that this is where we get into the conversational part of the evening. Welcome, folks.
Welcome. So it's Genesis chapter 4 is where we get a picture of like what it is, and it starts like this in the New Living Translation. Now Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I produced a man." Later, she gave birth to a brother and named him Abel. Now, some might say, what's that have to do with tithing? Well, A, you had to have the people for the next part of the story. And B, Mike and I talked about sex on last week's episode, so if you haven't caught it, go back and listen. So, of course, it's only appropriate to start this episode with Adam and Eve still having sex. So that was a long time, apparently. But it actually goes on to this, and this is the tithing part. It says, when they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, and Cain cultivated the ground. So this is pretty interesting. So it says, when the time came for the harvest, Cain presented, and this is interesting wording, some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he didn't accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. So, for those that are going, what the heck is tithing? We see in Genesis 4 this thing, and it doesn't use the word tithe there, but we see basically that they're living in a life where they, their parents walked with God in the Garden of Eden, right? So one would think that they have a pretty good picture of who God is and how everything they have is a gift from God. So you see back, and it wasn't uncommon, even before we learned about the Hebrew God, right? It wasn't uncommon that people who worshipped other gods would give sacrifices and offerings. This was common to gods in the time that this was written by Moses, okay? So we see basically Cain and Abel responding to going, okay, there's this God, and we're supposed to offer a sacrifice to him. And they actually have personal interaction with God. So it's not like this is like Zeus, who they'd never met and thought was a god. Like, they'd interacted. And what we saw was two examples. One guy giving God his best, and one guy giving God what's left. Right. And that's the first story of tithing. And I think that shapes, though, it's a good way to look at, like, how do we view it now? Because, like, I gotta tell you, man, a couple years ago, if somebody asked me, well, not if somebody, all right, I'm just gonna come clean. A few years ago, my wife, before she was my wife, said to me, as I was going through a lot of turmoil, she goes, how's your tithing? And I was like, did you just miss the whole part where I told you, like, my companies are crushed and I'm losing everything I have? And she's like, no, I didn't miss it at all. But what you have, like, what are you giving? Like, are you giving your first fruits to God? And I was like, I think he understands that I'm broke. She's like, I mean, you're paying your phone bill. You're going out a couple nights a week. So, like, are you, though? And I was like, oh, come on. I'm like, oh, what's up, Pastor Nate? So I was like, man, she hit me right in the feels with it. And I really had to reflect and say, am I giving God anything? And I wasn't. And then she, God, I love my wife so much. He gave me a great wife. Then she busted me out with a little bit of Malachi 3. And so for those who don't know, like, Malachi in this chapter, like, he's talking to the sons of Levi, but it's also believed that he's talking to the priests of Israel as well, right? So the Levites and the priests of Israel. And it sounds like, as Malachi is this priest who's giving this inspired word from God. He says, I am God, yes I am, I haven't changed, and because I haven't changed, you, the descendants of Jacob, haven't been destroyed. Meaning, look, I'm a good loving God, and I'm not, here I am protecting you guys all the time. And he goes, you have a long history of ignoring my commands. You haven't done a thing I've told you. Return to me so I can return to you, says the God of angels' armies. And then it goes on and says, you ask, but how do we return? And by the way, I'm reading this from the Message, okay? Malachi chapter 3, picked up in verse 6. They said, you ask, but how do we return? And God, in chapter 8, as Malachi sharing this, says, begin by being honest. Do honest people rob God? But you rob me every day. And they said, how have we robbed you? He says, the tithe and the offering. That's how. And now you're under a curse, the whole lot of you, because you're robbing me. But here's where it actually gets pretty cool, okay? Because first it's like, wait a minute. God, what does God need money for, right? I mean, he's God.
Yeah, he's God. He doesn't. That's
No.
but here's the key, I think, if I may.
Bring
may
it.
I?
Yeah, but I'm on the picture, so you should.
Well,
be on the picture.
because you were on fire, I'll bring me on the picture. So the thing is, tithing is not about money.
Thank you.
Tithing's not about money because God already owns everything. It says multiple places in the Bible,
Yes.
right? The verse that I picked is Deuteronomy. It says, "Look, the highest heavens and the earth and everything and all in it all belong to the Lord your God." God already owns everything. He doesn't need the 10%. It's not about the money. It's about the lesson. It's about it's about, for example, I was listening to Dr. Miles Monroe.
Okay.
Are you familiar? And I was
I've heard
listening
the name, but I'm
to.
not familiar.
So one of the things that stood out and why I jump in at this part is he was talking about that. And he says, hey, look, when God requests this, it's not about the money. It's not because he needs it.
No, come on.
And he says it's like a biblical management training program. And I thought that was a kind of an awesome
It
perspective.
kind of is.
And so going back in time for just 1 second, talking about tithes specifically, I think that, and I don't know the root, like the Latin root or the tithe means tenth, correct, or 10% in some form or fashion. So where we get the 10% number from is from the word tithe. One perspective also is that okay, the first 10%. Right? It's not the last 10%, it's the first 10%. So we're being trained to the lesson is that you have to be mindful and disciplined to be able to give that first to God. He already owns it anyway, right?
Yes.
If you had $1,000, how much of that $1,000 is God's?
All of it.
$1,000, right? All of it. So the key is right? The key is, too, when we're giving to God, and I think there is a little bit of a difference between a tithe and an offering. Now,
so for those that are listening that aren't familiar with those churchy words that sometimes we use, the tithe is basically the first fruits that you're putting back into the church, into the ministry, right? And an offering is typically like. The way that I see it in most churches is like a special offering, right? You've got a guest speaker's coming, and there's not a salary budget for a guest speaker, and sometimes they'll take a special offering because the person paid money to fly in or something like that, or we're raising money because we want to do a big campaign to feed the homeless in this neighborhood that we don't typically aren't able to typically reach. So let's take a special offering. So for those that are listening, there's some examples.
In addition to the offering, like the tithe is the biblical requirement. It's the first fruits, like Matt said. I'm gonna share a different perspective too. The offering then is the surplus. Part of the reason we want to get to where we get to, right? Part of the reason that people and we as humans, we always look at the tithe as money.
Of course.
Just a thought. Well, but here's the thing. If you're supposed to give 10% of all things to God, what about, and maybe we talk about this later in the show.
I know where you're coming. Come on.
If you're supposed to give 10% of all things to God, right, it's not just the money. It's what about your time?
Yeah, you're up for 16 hours a day, so where's the 1.6 hours to God?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're going there with this because here's the thing: if the Bible's continuous, right? Because God can't contradict Himself, and people act like there's Old Testament God and New Testament God, but it's interesting because when Jesus tells people, right, to put God first in Matthew chapter 6, which we've talked about before, and I'll hit on later. Okay, when Jesus tells people, right. Seek God first, the rest will be added. Like, there's an example. The first, see, we always focus on the tithe as the 10th, right? Because we looked at that means the 10th. Okay, God picked whatever number He wanted to pick for us to represent it, but it was to represent that we have to remember the beginning of everything. We should be giving back to God. Just like when people look at following Jesus, it's like, okay, well, I'm not doing Him a favor by sharing His word. right? Like I can't save myself, so I'm not doing it to earn salvation. So it's supposed to be in response to what he did for me. But the same can be done by those of us who are trying to share God's word. We can give him our leftovers of it. Like, all right, I'm at the end of the day, I guess I'll sit down and write a blog post about Jesus.
Yeah.
Or I'll read my
minutes.
Bible. I've done all my stuff during the day. Now I'll give God the last 10 minutes of the night. But in the morning, the beginning, when your eyes open, the first thing you do, what is it? Right? Are you tithing your time to God? The moment you wake up, are you saying, God, thank you? And are you getting in his word and saying, this is your time, God? And so I love what you said. It's more than money. It's our life.
We look at it as money. And so when you're saying, okay, if it's 16 hours a day, or if you have 24 hours in a day, so if it's 1.6 hours or 2.4 hours or whatever that number is, one of the things here, let me put this in perspective for you watching right now. The question, and Matt, you said this perfectly, because it's like, oh, it's the end of the day. Gosh, I should pray before I go to bed. So God, let me give you 10 minutes. The thing is, the rest of the day, how many hours did you give to social media and TV and other crap that doesn't make a difference?
Right?
Right? Oh, well, I gotta catch my show. My show's really important, so I gotta give an hour to that. Well, keep in mind, you're just giving the time. You're focusing the time to go somewhere based on what you believe is important in the moment. And what happens for many people is then all of a sudden when you have it, and that's why, and Dara's watching, so I'm going to call you right back out, which is great. When she asked you, how's your tithe? Because you were giving so much to all the other stuff. And this is not a shot. Matt and I love each other. You're giving so much to other stuff, but then all of a sudden we're not giving it to God. And it's like, well, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden we hit our knees and it's like, please God, help me out. And he's like, well, where were you at last Monday?
Yeah, where you been, bro?
Where you been? Well, hey, welcome back. Welcome back to the channel.
Bro, well, and that's why I find
someone
it
needs to start God's YouTube channel. They probably already have.
Dude, that would be probably not good. But here's the funny part, and this is what I loved about, when Dara had brought that up to me, and she said, she had said to me, and it's funny, I never spent a lot of time in Malachi. I just didn't. One of my favorite, right? We all have our little favorite Bible hero books. I loved Revelation because I'm a weirdo. So I didn't spend a ton of time in Malachi. But when she brought it to me, and Malachi verse 10, right? Okay. She had said to me, she goes, well, why don't you start giving God that first? And why don't you test him and see if he doesn't come through for you? And I was like, whoa, quoting Jesus out in the, in the desert, like, whoa, you don't test the Lord your God. She's like, I think you might need to go reread Malachi chapter 3. So I'm gonna read this because it's so important.
Got it.
So the tithe and the offering, that's how, when they said, how have we robbed you? He said, the tithe and the offering. He goes, and now you're under a curse, the whole lot of you, because you're robbing me. Now, so first he tells them, look, because of you not giving me your first fruits, don't you realize the crap that your life has become? And it wasn't, again, I'll say, it doesn't seem like the message was, hey, you're not giving me enough money, and that's why you suck right now. It was like, look, if you're not giving me this first, what other firsts aren't you giving me? And so we got to keep that in perspective. But he goes like this. He goes, bring your full tithe to the temple treasury, so there will be ample provisions in my temple. That it says, test me in this and see if I don't open up heaven itself to you and pour out blessings beyond your wildest dreams. For my part, I'll defend you against marauders, protect your wheat fields and vegetables gardens against plunderers. The message of God of the angel armies. You'll be voted happiest nation. You'll experience what it's like to be a country of grace. The God of the angel armies says so. Now, the New Living Translation says something pretty similar to that, only not the same, but it's the same meaning, okay? Right. Basically, what Malachi is saying to the Levites and to the priests of Israel is he's saying, look, we're in a bad way right now. We're under a curse, right? What's the curse? Well, obviously he's telling them, right? Your crops are sucking. They're getting tore up by insects and disease. The grapes are falling down, right? Like all of this is happening. So he's saying, look, if you bring the tithes into the storehouse, there will be enough food in my temple. He's saying, look, when you bring the first fruits, like people aren't getting it. It's like bringing in the temple. You're keeping it safe there too. Duh. But he's going, you do this, and here's what I'm doing for you. I'm protecting you. Don't you see? I'm protecting you. I'm protecting your crops. I'm giving you instructions for how to do it. So why don't you try it and see if I'm right? Like, it's almost like you just want to laugh because I wish that it would say in there, like, because I'm God, duh. Like, listen to me. But we don't. But that was the thing that Dara called me out on, and I had. Yes. And I had to learn that. And here's the funny thing, dude. I'll tell you, through all the storms, and Dara can vouch for this right now. What's up, Lily Williams in the house? Today, Lily is
we're talking tithing.
So, as Lily's in a money suit, I think, in that picture. I love it.
I'm going to pull it back up.
Put that back up. Come on now. I love it.
Oh, come on.
So
the money suit.
So Derek can vouch for this. Dude, the moment money hits my hands, my Venmo, my cash, whatever, the moment anything hits, the first thing I do is log on and give. The first thing. And as we pray for provision, we pray for provision so we can be generous. Not so that we can, stack Lambos and buy a big baller house. There's nothing wrong with that stuff, by the way. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the blessings God gives you, but it's like, where's the first go? Where's your heart go? Do we recognize God's giving it to us, or are we just like, oh, sweet, I got fat stacks to make it rain on new cars and homes?
No, you're absolutely right. Here's one of the other things to consider, because again, I know we as humans come into associating the tithe with money. So what happens, Matt?
Yeah.
What happens, Matt, if you're broke?
What do you mean, Mike? Like, if you have no money to give?
If you have no money to give.
I remember this beautiful thing that I heard, and it was Jesus was hanging out and watching what was happening in a temple. And there were these people loaded that were just making it rain with coins so you could hear it all, right?
Cha-ching,
cha-ching, cha-ching. And an old widow, it says, went up and put all she had, a penny. Now, if we say mathematically, right, the Pharisees, the priests, like they were the Sadducees, the rich young rulers in the local town, they were giving the most money. So obviously they were making the biggest difference in the kingdom, right? Or were they? This broke woman only had a penny, and that's what she gave. Look, we could be as broke as could be. I bet you could find a penny in the couch, right?
Yep.
Here's the thing I'll say, and this was one of the toughest things for me to grasp, Mike, because I was broke when I started tithing. I don't have anything anyway. None of it's mine. That was the hard thing to get.
Right.
I don't own anything I have. Like, we can think I own it, right? Like, I don't want someone coming in robbing us, stealing stuff, right? Because we've paid for it, we worked hard, right? But even the job to be able to pay for it was a gift from God. So that, like, the reality is, when you're broke, what you do have is from God. And if you don't have money to give, what do you have, right? Like, what do you
have?
You
knowledge,
have time. You have
counsel.
love, right? You have love. You have encouragement. You have things that you don't know you have. And here's the thing: even when you're broke, right? Like, you've got rent to pay, you've got that. Maybe you're struggling financially, right? And it might sound like the weirdest thing to hear me say, give anyway and test God. Like, give anyway and test God. Even if all you're getting right now is $160 a week unemployment, give 16 of it. Just give 16 of it. And you might say, but I don't have a local church that I go to, right? Like, I just started believing in God during the pandemic. So, like, I watch my church online, and that's so. Right. Where do I give? Who do I give to? You know what? The Bible tells us, Jesus tells us to feed the hungry, right? Shoe the people without shoes, right? So take care of the widow. So you know what? If you've got a neighbor that's struggling more than you, maybe you just put an envelope anonymously and toss it in there under their door. If you got a local food bank or homeless shelter, I mean, go donate to that. Go donate time to that, right? We're called to take care of people and take care of this planet. So to use your time as a way to give. You can always do that too. So, but here's a question I want to ask you, Mike, because I think this is the kicker, and this will lead to some dialogue on it. When you give your tithe, Oh, I like it. Lily said, I tend to say a person is not broke. They may have a financial deficiency. However, what they do have that they can share and give a part of. Time, food, love, etc. Yes. Amen.
Absolutely. Amen.
So what's the tithe supposed to go for? I think there's a challenge, a question that people ask, and I think this is what causes them to wrestle with tithing, right? Is they go, but when I give this money to the church, what are they going to use it for? Right? Like that seems to be a question because I've seen people rail about Joel Osteen, for example, right? He doesn't even ask for giving because I think, in a stadium of a bazillion people, they do. But he's loaded, right? He's got a big baller house. What's up, Jordan? Good to see you. Thank you for jumping on. He's got a big baller house. He drives, beautiful cars, right? So Joel and Victoria Osteen have a ton of dough, right? And I've seen people literally go to town attacking that. And I'm like, you realize the guy doesn't take a salary from his church, right? Like all of their money comes from their books and the things that they create. And we don't know what they give, but I don't think we're supposed to look or care what someone else is giving, right? Like God, that's accountability between Joel, Victoria, and the Lord, number one. And number two, the Bible tells us, like, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Like your giving it's an act of obedience to God and servanthood. So, Mike, what do you think about, though, when people go, I don't know that I want to give to this church because I don't have transparency on every single thing the church spends my money on?
Well, I have two things. One, I think, not to answer a question with a question, but before I respond directly, one of the concerns is I think that people are often hesitant about that is because they've been burned.
How so?
There are times people have given and they've given everything that they can, money, time, volunteered, and so forth, just to find out later to have the church in the news and the pastor was skimming off the top and so forth. And so
I've seen that before.
Or things like that happen.
Or they've gone to the church when they've been struggling and the church like saying, "Hey, we can't pay our mortgage," and the church is like, "Oh, we'll pray for you."
Right. So they get burned and they don't get back in what the expectation is or what the thought is or what they feel they're owed or deserve, if that makes sense. I mean, you can jump in here and stop me anytime.
I like where you're going with it.
I mean, that's somewhat human nature. I mean, you're saying, what does the tithe go for? I mean, the tithe is, it's one, you guys got to understand, it's not your place or position to say what the tithe goes for. It's your place and position to give the tithe freely of your heart, mind, soul to God. Whether it's, Dara brought up over here and she says, do you give to a project or a church? Or are you giving back to God? Again, if what you have, and I'm not to skip steps here if this isn't a direction of where you're going, if you're broke and you've got the penny to give, if you're, what did Lily call it? If you're financially deficient.
Yes.
If you're financially deficient and what you have to give is the penny and some time, then what are you doing to donate 1.6 hours of your time to be able so that once you do that, God will give you the chance to grow up financially.
Bro, okay? Thank you.
Because when you don't do that, you're staying in like toddler mode. Right? God, I don't want... It's like... who was it? Oh, my gosh. I got to think. I was watching a video, and it was about finances. It was Dave Ramsey, I think.
Probably.
And he was... he was sharing about... He says, look, and he was talking about some biblical principles, and he was talking about his grandkids, granddaughters, or whatnot. And he says, it's not hard for me to pick up and carry... my granddaughter, my 8-month-old or 10-month-old granddaughter, it's not hard for any of us to pick up that newborn child, right? For any of us that have kids, though he said the 2-year-old or the 3-year-old toddler, it's hard for them to pick that child up and carry him. So the thing is, you have to be able to grow up biblically. And I'm equating it to this. It's like, you got to be able to grow up financially, right? You have to be able to receive God's lesson and take that lesson in management to give the first part first.
Yep.
And then when you do that, understand that whatever it is that you're giving freely of yourself and your soul, and you're giving from a position of strength.
And so here's something I love that Jordan just said. It all comes down to stewardship. Something that my wife Dara says often is, nothing I have is for me to keep. It's all for me to steward. It's all God's. So the love I have is to give. The resources I have is to give. The smile I have is to give. And I love that perspective. And what I just popped out in my head as you were talking was something. So I remember we were listening to the book Multiply by John Bevere, which, by the way, I hate. Just so you know, I like John Bevere. I hate the book. The whole book's full of fake, humble bragging to me, and all he focuses on is multiply your money, multiply your time, multiply the what you're making the kingdom the difference. While I believe that it is true, we need to multiply all of that, and it can benefit the kingdom. I just don't like the book. I think it's written in a way that is play and pick a verse to support the thing. But here's why I bring that up to you, because he talks about the parable of talents in there. And how how absolutely live in Matthew 25, for those of you listening, picks up in verse 14. How livid, right, the guy got because they didn't multiply what was given to them, right? And like he was so angry, and the whole point was like, you're supposed to multiply. You know what just hit me with that is it reminded me of also in the scriptures, he who's faithful with little will be faithful with much. Okay. And so maybe the parable of the talents was less about multiplication as it was about stewardship of what we have. If you've got a little, that's okay, but you're still supposed to bring back, bring something back from that. Well, how can you do that and the guy didn't bring it back to God, right? So that lesson was not just you didn't multiply and grow, which is a good lesson and there's truth in that. But he didn't bring anything back, really. It was just like, you handed me this thing and it's in the dirt, and now it's got a little dirt on it. You got it back. He was basically saying, here's what's left of what you gave me. And that's why it goes back to what you said. It's not about the dollar amount. It's not even specifically about the percentage, but God gave that to us for an easy understanding, right? The first tenth, bring it back. But what this guy did was he didn't say, it wasn't like a loving, here you go, I'm so grateful to give you all of this. What he said was, I knew you were harsh and you're a mean dude, so I made sure to bury this. Here, you can have it back. Which is saying what? It's saying, there's nothing special here. Let me give you back the stuff that I was too scared to even be part of, because it doesn't mean anything to me. And what God wants us to recognize is, when he hands us something, it means something. It means something to him. If he gives you $1, that dollar is for you to do something with that isn't just for you. So to go, I have $1, I'm going to go break that dollar and I'm going to bring back 10 cents and go, God, none of this is mine. So here, let me put this right back. And now we look at what I think the tithe reminds us to go, okay, here's the 10% back to God. But Jesus said what? Love God, love others. So I think we're also reminded to go then, it's bigger than the 10%. What are you doing with the other 90? We get so hemmed in on what's the church doing with my money. It's not your money. We get so hemmed in and how is the church spending the money? That's like they're supposed to, they're on the hook with God for how they manage that. Their biblical mandate. Are they feeding the hungry? Are they caring for the widow? They'll answer to God. They're not to answer to me and you. Now, it's fair to say, okay, we're itty bitty church with 40 starving people and the pastor bought a new Benz. Okay, maybe you got some concerns. Okay. Sure. I'm not going to, like, that I can respect to go, are you stewarding well? And that's more of a question of, are you the right leader? Are you submitting to the right leadership there in that church? But we can't, every time we start going, when I hand this money over, what are you doing with it? That means I'm saying, I own this. I am in control of this. How are you going to spend? We're putting ourselves in the position of the master that handed out the silver to the people. Instead of realizing we got one master. Everything we got is his, and we're just supposed to steward that. We've got to take our eyes off of what am I giving and realize I'm not I'm not giving anything, right? It's all been given to me.
Right.
It's a blessing to be able to steward this and pass it to some other people.
It's been given to me, so I need to pass it on. One other thought, and I think this is important to understand too when we're talking about tithing, is that yes, you should be giving the 10%, and we'll use money because that's what we're wired around. People are wired around.
And to be clear, folks watching, you're not supposed to go, well, I don't want to give money, so I'll give my time. Don't be a turd. You're supposed to give all of yourself to God.
But here's it's 10% of everything. Everything.
That's just the basics too. You should be like, I want to be so generous. I want to give as much as I can.
Well, but that's where you're able to start offering and give surplus and do other stuff. But one of the things to consider too is if you are in that position of being financially deficient, I'm going to use that from now on.
I do like that.
1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8 says, "But those who won't care for their relatives, especially in those in their own household, have denied true faith." So God's not saying you have to give 10% no matter what of your cash money dollars, right? If you're really in that position, keep in mind it says here that you do have to care for your relatives. You do have to care for your own household. If you don't, such people are worse than unbelievers. So you need to take care of that. And when you take care of those people, and the moment that you have the ability to, while you're doing these other things, that you do give the penny. The penny then multiplies.
On that one, though.
Okay.
I am going to push back on it, and here's why. And I'm going to push back, and I'm going to start that pushback with the last comment that Dara shared, which is tithing's a heart matter, not a money matter. If we're struggling financially, dude, I was in that spot that you just said, okay? Mm-hmm. But here's the reality. If we're not giving our first fruits, even when we're struggling, what are we really saying to God, though?
I'm not saying, what if the first fruits that you have is only in counsel?
No. I'm saying is money. We're going right back to money.
Well,
if you're getting a check, even if that check is barely enough to cover anything, if we're saying, well, my money's tight, so I'm not going to tithe, but I do have time. Whoa. Do you have money in your hand? Where is that from? Well, now, we can easily go, but I got bills to pay. And I'm not saying we're not supposed to also honor the commitments we've made.
Right.
But what we're saying when we go, I only got $1,000, so I can't give 100 because I've got $1,000 worth of bills. What we're saying is, God, I don't trust you to fill in the blanks, so I'm not going to give. That's the honest truth of what we're saying. And I'm not saying that to convict someone else. I'm saying it because I live in that conviction of doing it. Okay?
Sure.
That was me. That's what I was saying. Dara had shared another comment. She experienced this truth for herself, and this is why she pushed me in that Malachi verse. She said, I've tithed since my first paycheck since coming to God. Her check was $1,000. That was it. She could barely make rent, and she tithed anyway, and she's never gone without enough to cover what was needed. Here's the reality. Money might be tight, but I can tell you this. Your money won't grow by holding back from God.
That's true.
And here's the reality. You're not holding back from God when you say, I can't tithe because my money's tight. And by the way, and for those listening, I don't have any skin in the game. None of y'all are donating to me yet. So here's the thing.
Next week we're going to put the PayPal on the screen.
No, it'll be first of March. No, I'm just kidding. No, but here's the honest thing. We've got to look in the mirror and say this, though, and this is the hard part. What you have, you wouldn't have if God didn't bless you with it. So how are you saying money's too tight for me to give when you wouldn't have that money if God didn't give it to you? And then we have to say, am I not trusting him? You know, we see in Malachi, he's talking about, look, if you want your fields, your harvest to happen, if you want your life to be better, stop, he used the word, stealing from God.
Yep.
Now, come on. Those are harsh words, but So that's why I push back, Mike, because I love you, and what you just did was say a nice thing that lets people off the hook by quoting 1 Timothy 5:8. But those who don't care for their relatives, I would argue by not giving, they're really not caring for their relatives, because what they're doing is showing their relatives, I don't trust God, and you shouldn't either.
So Dara says, your gifts will not grow when you're holding back from God, which absolutely exemplifies what you're talking about. Secondly, Jonathan Dawson. Good to see you, Jonathan.
What's up, John Dawson?
Tithing, as it is commonly taught, is not biblical. It's not sound doctrine to teach that people should tithe.
I would love it if you could elaborate on what you mean by that, John. Feel free to pop something deeper in the comment, but I will say that much. Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, John, that's what we were just talking about, that it's your whole life, right? Like it's not about the money. If you missed the first part of the show, it's not about the money. It's about everything God gives us to steward, right? So money's just one piece of the puzzle.
Well, and I think one of the places that Jonathan's coming from is like when you, depending on how you or where you look for research on this sort of message, the system that we go by now, right, in the economy, the system, it was specifically designed to meet the needs of like the religious, economic, political system in ancient Israel, because that was one of the ways to be able to approach. And so when they said, well, the tithe, it's 10%, I do agree with Jonathan on that. It's not well, I agree with
Well, at the
Jonathan
beginning, when we see Cain and Abel, right, the very beginning of giving an offering to God, it's obviously not money.
Correct.
One could also argue there wasn't currency back then, right? I mean, that's just kind of logical, right? But it shows us from the very beginning it's a heart issue, not a money thing, right? Like am I realizing that everything I have is from God? Am I taking the best of everything He's given me and saying, God, you deserve the best part of what I've got in my life, right? Like that's the beginning. But to say, well, I would agree with John to say to make the focus of tithing all about money would be biblically incorrect. But I would say from the beginning, when we see an offering to God, we're taught to bring the first and best of whatever we get to God. I would also push back and say we see in Malachi, again, it's not talking about money, but it's talking about crops, right? It's talking about that, bringing them in the storehouse. And then one would say, well, what's it supposed to be used for? Well, hopefully the church is using it, right, to feed the hungry, to take care of people. Now we fast forward time to now, not everybody has crops. Not everybody raises cattle.
No,
so to say that biblically... It's
the exchange of currency. It's the exchange of currency for those same things.
Yeah, but so here's the thing. So to say there's no biblical support, I would push back on that a little, and I would say this. It is accurate, right, if we want to get semantically accurate to say, the Bible doesn't say, take 10% of your paycheck and give it to me in those words. But what we see exampled over and over is to take the tithe, which does say the 10th, if you look it up in the Hebrew lexicon, which does say the 10th, but really, again, it goes back to a heart issue. We're supposed to give the first and best of what we've got to God. And I think there are a lot of people that love to try and cop out on the financial. Nobody said we owe God, but I think a lot of people try and cop out on the financial thing and go, well, we don't have to give money because it's not there. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing, John, but I think that's a slippery slope to pretend. And if you know me, you'll know I'm not like Pharisee doctrine, God's the law. That's not my jam, and that's not who I am. I believe God's heart is that of love, and here's the reality. How can the church, now, pause, the church is the people, but now let's talk about the house of worship we go to and the gathering of the body, okay? There's one of two ways it can be done, right? We can all individually, as we should be doing, help, feed the hungry, clothe those without it, care for the orphans and widows. We can and should all do that individually. There is something amazing about when a group of people come together to do something like that in a big way and can make a beautiful impact. Good example, the church that we go here, right? The church that we go here, John, it was applied to them because there wasn't currency in Genesis. I would push back on a little bit. But so the church we go to is great. Every Friday they do a thing called Provide Hope, where they have boxes of just tons of food, and people drive through in their cars, and they give them food, sometimes gift cards to go with it, right? All of the food and stuff is given to the church from different local restaurants and grocery stores and stuff, and gift cards are paid for. There's a truck that the church had to pay for, right? Stuff like that. There are things that cost actual money and currency, and so it's important to realize that in order to provide, some of us have to pay for it. That's just how it works. So to say it's not biblical to give money, here's the question: is it extra biblical or is it anti-biblical, John? If you're saying the Bible doesn't specifically command money is the tithe measuring stick, I would agree with you. But I would say everything we have is a gift from God, including our money. And if we're not willing to also give the first of our finances, I think we got to look in the mirror and hold back on that. If you're saying it's anti-biblical, like we shouldn't give, I would just say you can't show me any scripture to prove that. I think you can take and pick a verse and make your point proven, but I don't think in the context of anything that you read, you can say it's wrong to give your finances so that the church will use those to create blessing. I think it would be
and
anti-biblical to say that, actually.
Where we're at right now, the finances, the currency, the specific, that's the exchange. Those are our fruits. That's the fruits of our labor right now. Is right. We donate. We give our time, and in turn, we are paid for that time. And like I mean, if you look back in Deuteronomy 26, because I was looking as you were talking, and to Jonathan's point. It starts off, what are we, 26, 12, and 13. When you finish setting aside a tenth of all your produce in the third year, the year of the tithe, you shall give it to the foreigner, the fatherless, the widow, so they may eat in your towns and be satisfied. Say to the Lord, I've removed from my house a sacred portion. I've given you this, the foreigner, the fatherless, the widow, according to all you commanded. I have not turned aside from your commands, nor have I forgotten any of them. Well, again, in this example, it's talking about, hey, a tenth of all your produce. Well, what is our produce here? And you're saying specifically,
and just shift the way that you say that word from produce to what do we produce? What
do we produce? Right. So believe me, like going through this hour, as Jonathan is sharing here, and he's saying, hey, happy to discuss, happy to hop on a call and so forth, which would be awesome. We certainly can do that as well. But in 2021, we are not in biblical times. So there is something to be said. I mean, we are in biblical. I know, Matt, you're going to argue that.
No, I know what you're saying. We don't live in the same time period that it was written.
That the Bible was written.
Well, and that's the danger.
What are your first fruits now?
Thank you. Yeah,
what are your first fruits?
And that's the thing. It frustrates me a little bit. Not sometimes, dude. It always burns me up a little.
I shouldn't say biblical times. It's time period.
No. That's not the part that burns me up. The part that frustrates me is that oftentimes, though, we will take something that was written a few thousand years ago, and we go, oh, I'm going to cling to the literal part of that. But take the rest of the scripture and we get metaphoric and figurative, or we don't take into account, as we are wrestling with the scriptures, right? As we're actually digging in and looking to understand, there are things we have to take into account. The time it was written, right? Of course, when Moses is writing Genesis, he's not going to say, hey, by the way, that also goes for Bitcoin. Right? Like, because it didn't exist. It's stupid, right? It's stupid to say that. So it frustrates me when we go, well, the Bible said this, and so I'm just Bible. Like, I'm just only reading the word. It's like the Bible also, there weren't cars, there weren't airplanes, right? There are things that now exist in the world, and we can't pretend like those don't belong to God because they weren't in the scriptures. Like, what do we go? Okay, well, God's gifts only stop at the produce and the animals that we get. That's a load of malarkey.
Well, and that would be like looking at it going, well,
malarkey.
Here's the thing.
I'm 100.
the malarkey. The Bible applies if it was pre-industrial revolution, but after the industrial revolution, there's different rules.
True.
And now we're in the.
True
like,
that people
no.
think like that. Well, dude,
No.
here's the thing though, and here's the challenge, and here's and I've talked to John. I love John. I think John is great.
Absolutely.
Same page. But I want to take what he said about the tithing money is not a biblical principle, and here's the danger with that thought process if not properly understood in the context of what John means. And I don't know for sure what he means, but I'm going to say this: if someone reads it in the context, you're not supposed to give your money in any way. You're not supposed to be doing that. If someone were to read that, I would challenge that a little to say, so that's not a gift from God? It doesn't belong to God too? And then I would remind them, remember the conversation that Jesus had with the rich young ruler. Now, someone might say, well, yeah, but he was asking him to give away all of his money. Okay, don't miss the point in the message. That guy was young and powerful and had money. So he had the trifecta of the things that we put in the place of God. Right? I'm young. I'll live forever. I've got power. People listen to me. They worship me because I'm so powerful. I got money so I can buy what I want. So I got the things that give me what I need to feel like I am God. But the Bible also tells us you can't worship two masters. You can't love God and money at the same time. Money is not evil. Okay? Money is not the root of all evil. But Scripture does tell us the love of money is. So I would challenge with what John shared that someone doesn't go, oh, good, because I love my money. I'm so glad someone said, it's not scriptural to give. I'm going to say, no, that's crap. You got your money because God has blessed you. And you might say, yes, but I've worked hard. And I would say, who made sure you were born healthy to be able to do the job you can do, right? Like, what is that? Is that not also a gift from God? The fact that you can earn what you earn? Now listen, if you've been blessed, I believe we're also supposed to enjoy the blessings. Notice that when we see the example of Cain and Abel giving their first fruits, when we see in Malachi him telling the sons of the Levites and the priests of Israel, hey, give the tithe, which then meant tenth of your crops. When we're seeing that, all of it is a heart issue. What it means is those people were withholding something from giving. And the lesson that it seems we're supposed to learn the whole time is God says, you can trust me to take care of you and keep you safe. So why are you not trusting me with everything you have? And we're falling in love with money. It's not wrong if you make $1 million a year and you drive a Lambo, cool. It's your generosity is yours. I get so mad when people are like, oh, Jeff Bezos has all this money. He shouldn't. Sure, he should. He worked. He created something amazing.
Right.
His intellect was a gift. I hope that
his intellect was a gift from God.
Yeah, and then people say, well, no, he studied in this. Yes, he did, and his brain works because God gave him a brain. But here's the thing, I'm not going to say, well, Jeff Bezos better do this or he's a piece of crap. No, because it's not for me to look at, right? But I would say I hope, I hate when people judge somebody for being wealthy because it's you don't know what their generosity is. You don't know what they do with it.
You don't know what their offering is above what they're. You don't know what they're doing, and
it's not for you to judge or know. Just like when Christians run around going, "Oh, it's all about getting people saved." Is it though, or is it about serving the people Jesus saved? Come on, pick a verse. Come on. With this.
Come on.
Man, it just drives me nuts.
Come on, man.
It just drives me nuts. So Lily said back in those days, people didn't have currency like cash money. They grew food. They had things they offered, which was times. At times, they also traded and bartered. Nowadays, money currency is used more often. Amen. Dara said, where'd you go, Mike? I don't know if your mic... If Mike's mic went out?
I think Mike's mic is here. It's because I had you highlighted. You have a prettier face than I do, so I was like this.
Oh, it was the picture. And my wife was like, nah, I like it better when you guys both talk.
Yeah, she missed me.
Someone missed me. I told you she's great, dude. I totally outkicked my coverage. I have an amazing wife. So I know we're beating a dead horse, but at the end of the day, here's the thing. Everything you got, if you don't believe that everything you've got is from God, I would challenge you, go back to the scriptures and pray. And ask God, hey, do you not want me to give? And I would say this. If you can't give with a good heart, you shouldn't give. Because just like Cain, okay, let's take it right back to the beginning of the show and the story. Cain begrudgingly gave stuff. Like it makes it seem like Cain gave his leftovers to God, and God said, "I don't want those. Like I don't want them at all. Like just keep them." So it just shows it's not about money. It's not about the amount of stuff we give God. It is, we see a biblical example of Cain begrudgingly giving, and God going, I don't want that. I want your heart. I want you to lovingly want to be generous. God, like you said, God's training us with that little amount, because when He pours the blessing, what are we going to do with the other 90%?
Absolutely. Or what are we going to do when the 10% becomes a bigger 10%?
Right? We were reading, it was I forget what it was. No, it was in that John Bevere book. This was a beautiful thing in it. One of the guys he was talking about was the guy gives away 85% of his income, or 90% of his income. He lives on the 10% and gives away 90% of his income. Now, someone could go, well, that's not biblical. No, you know what it is? Generous. And you know what we're called to be? Generous. And amazingly, in the book, what he talks about is every year this guy's income has dramatically grown. Now, this is not some name it and claim it sermon. This isn't some prosperity gospel crap. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that man, his drive and goal was to be generous beyond anything that makes sense to us. And I doubt a person in the world would look at that guy that knew him and go, oh, he loves money, even though his income might be $800,000 a year as the 10%.
Right.
This dude's giving away $7,200,000 of it, right? So, like, we've got to realize it seems like the lesson God is teaching us in tithing is, let me teach you how to be a giver, because when I bless you, I don't want you to forget how to be a giver to the people that actually need the help. That's what I get from it.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it is one of the basic principles when it comes to. It's funny because on a different level, I was sharing that in a leadership training, that it's like, hey, when you get to that place, whatever that place is, don't forget about the things that got you to that place.
Come on,
and I think so that's the exact, and that can be used as a management principle, a leadership principle, and certainly in this forum as a principle when we're talking about giving to God, giving of ourselves. When you get to that place, don't forget what got you to that place.
Oh, dude,
because I think there's a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people that do that. They get to that place and they say, "Thanks, God." Put the stamp on it. I'm out, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute, right? And so I think there's a lot of value in that, Matt.
Bro, I think this is just a good dialogue. And for those that might have listened, they're like, I hate that dialogue. Sorry that you hated it, but it's an important one, because it really does speak to the hard issue.
And I'm going to throw this out here too, because Matt and I try and pick a good topic. If there's something, as we're kind of coming to the close of our show here, if there's a topic that's weighing on your heart, because we're starting to gain a little bit of momentum and some following here between the Clubhouse and the YouTube channels and so forth. If there's something that's weighing on your heart that you go, man, I would love to hear this sort of discussion and have these guys break it down. There are some people that are really connected with their faith. And if there's someone saying, I'd like to be a part of that conversation, I'm just going to throw it out there and say, hey, message one of us. We're not opposed. I'm going to call Pastor Nate out again. I'd love to have Pastor Nate on the show.
Oh, dude, if you think I've been texting him and trying to encourage him, you might be right.
So that would be, but again, he's one, we've had some really good dialogue over our time here and over the years and so forth. So if you have something weighing on your heart, send us a message. Let's have a conversation on it. We'd love to break down a show on it. If you want to get on a show with us and say, hey, as long as the big key is keeping the faith and the Bible and God and that message at the center. Yeah. That's what we want to do and make an impact with people, man.
Yeah, the
So-
whole idea is just to bring folks together. You guys, listen. There's people from different denominations, different faith upbringings, but if we've all had some sort of experience with the Bible. I shouldn't say we all. Most people have had some sort of experience where it either left a good or bad taste in their mouth, and even when we all think it tastes good, sometimes we could be sitting down at a meal. One of us thinks we're eating prime rib, the other one thinks we're eating a New York strip, and we might look at the Bible from two different perspectives. So this
Two different experiences.
Great place to join us and have those dialogues.
Absolutely. So with that, do us a favor too. Make sure, please subscribe to each of our channels. Love to connect with you on social media. Check us out on Clubhouse if you're into the audio format. And there was something else I was going to say. Oh, if you know someone that needs to hear this message, or you get into a conversation and you say, hey man, these guys are talking about sex, money, and God, I don't know what got into them, we got a show for it. Well,
I think the next thing we got to tackle, like we've talked about sex, money, the last couple things that are taboo. We haven't talked about drugs and rock and roll. So I think actually music is a great thing too to wrestle with.
We could. And again, for the time period, different music now than then. But,
right? Those are like, no, only a flute, a harp, and a lyre. And I don't mean the kind that's preaching this heretical crap.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another Friday night. We very value your time. We appreciate you. And we will see you back here next week, same time, 5 Pacific, 6 Mountain, 8 Eastern.
8 Eastern.
God bless you guys. We'll see you soon.